They say the dead rest quietly beneath the earth, but that's not always true. Some cemeteries hold more than just bones. They keep echoes, memories that never learned how to die. And sometimes, if you linger too long among the graves, those echoes notice you. Tonight, we'll explore 5 true stories from people who claim they've seen what should have stayed buried, from phantom mourners to impossible graves. These are the 5 creepy true cemetery horror stories that will make you think twice before walking past a headstone after dark. If you enjoy these stories, make sure to like, subscribe, and share your own experience in the comments below. You never know. Your story might be the next one we tell. Now, turn off the lights and let's begin. Story 1. Grave 47, The Whistling Man. My name is Daniel. I work as a part-time groundskeeper at a cemetery in northern Illinois. It's one of those large old cemeteries that sits right on the edge of town, half forest, half open fields. The place has been around since the 1800s, but the section I take care of mostly has newer graves from the 2000s onward. This story happened earlier this year, in April of 2024, during the first warm week after winter. We'd just started mowing again, clearing branches, fixing the fences, the usual. My shift usually ran from noon to about 7 in the evening, and sometimes I stayed later to help the night guard check the gates. One evening, the guy on the next shift called out sick, so I had to lock up. That meant doing a last round through all 6 sections, making sure no visitors were still inside. It was close to sunset, golden hour. The light was warm, but the shadows were long between the rows of stones. Everything was quiet until I reached Section D, the far side that borders the woods. That part always gave me the creeps. The trees there grow tight together, the air feels colder and cell service drops to 0. As I drove the golf cart along the path, I noticed a figure standing near a grave, tall, thin, facing away from me. I slowed down, assuming it was just someone visiting late. I called out that we were closing soon. The person didn't move. I called again, a bit louder. That's when I heard it, a faint whistling sound, a low, slow tune repeating itself, carried by the wind. I turned off the engine to listen more clearly, but the whistling didn't stop. It sounded human, but not natural. There were no pauses for breathing, no pitch change, just this hollow melody that looped and looped. I got off the cart and walked a little closer, calling out again that it was time to leave. The figure finally moved. It tilted its head slightly but didn't turn around. The whistling stopped. I took another few steps. That's when the figure stepped behind the gravestone and vanished. I ran up, thinking maybe they just crouched down or were hiding behind the stone, but there was nothing, no one. The grave belonged to a man named James Barlow, died 1923. And right there, etched faintly into the marble beneath his name, someone had scratched in crude letters, "Do not whistle near his grave." At that point, I told myself someone was just messing with me. I got back on the cart, finished my rounds, and locked up as fast as I could. When I got back to the office, I checked the maintenance log and noticed a note from one of the other guys. Wind knocked down flag near grave 47. Avoid at night. I didn't think much of it until I looked back at my clipboard map. James Barlow's grave was marked number 47. The next morning I mentioned it to my supervisor, Rick. He gave me a weird look and said, "You heard the whistling, didn't you?" I told him I wasn't sure what I heard, and he shook his head. Then he told me something that's been burned into my memory ever since. He said about 15 years ago, one of the older groundskeepers, a guy named Harold, went missing during his shift. They found his golf cart still running near Section D, the engine out of gas. His flashlight was lying in the grass, pointing at grave 47. He was never found. After that, the staff stopped mowing that section after dark. Some of them swore they heard a man whistling near the woods when the sun went down, a tune that sounded almost cheerful, but when you listened long enough, it felt like it was mocking you. I tried to brush it off as an urban legend among the workers, but last month I found something that made me rethink everything. I was repairing a broken sprinkler pipe near the fence line, about 30 feet from where I saw that figure. The ground was muddy from all the rain, and as I dug, I hit something hard. I thought it was a rock, but when I pulled it out, it was an old rusted metal whistle, the kind soldiers used back in World War I. I brought it back to the office, cleaned it off, and put it on the desk. Later that evening, when I was locking up again, I heard that same tune echoing from the woods. Slow, steady, like someone was trying to find the exact pitch of the whistle I had just found. I left it on the desk overnight. The next morning it was gone. Rick swears he didn't touch it. No one else had access to the office. The only thing I found was a single muddy footprint near the back door, bare, human, and too long to be from anyone living. I quit the job 2 weeks later. I told them it was because of family issues. Now I live about 10 miles away, and sometimes late at night when I'm outside taking out the trash or walking the dog, I swear I can still hear that same tune drifting in from the woods, faint, off-key, and getting closer. Story 2. The Girl in the Lantern Light. My name's Rebecca, and last autumn I made one of the biggest mistakes of my life. It started with something completely innocent. I wanted to visit my older sister's grave on her birthday. She passed away in September 2023 in a car accident that happened only a few miles from home. She was 24. I was 22. The cemetery where she's buried isn't that old, but it borders an older section that's basically forgotten. Half the tombstones are cracked, the dates faded to dust. The place closes at 6, but I worked a late shift that night and couldn't get there until after 7. I told myself it would be fine. I'd just hop the small side gate, leave the flowers, and go. It was a gray evening. No rain, just that heavy metallic air that feels like something's about to happen. I parked across the street, climbed over the gate, and started walking toward her plot. The sound of my boots crunching on the gravel echoed weirdly. Cemeteries are always quiet, but that night it felt too quiet, like even the wind was holding its breath. Her grave sits near the boundary between the new section and the old one. I placed the flowers down, said a little prayer, and sat for a few minutes. The light was fading fast. I remember thinking I should go before it got dark. That's when I noticed something. A faint, warm glow between the trees in the old section. It looked like a lantern. At first I thought maybe a groundskeeper was still around, so I called out, "Hello?" No answer. The light flickered once, then stayed steady. I should have left. I really should have left. But grief does weird things to you, and part of me felt drawn to it. Like maybe it was some kind of sign, some strange coincidence. I walked toward the light, weaving between crooked stones and tree roots. The glow grew brighter until I saw it clearly, an old metal lantern sitting on a short pedestal next to a child's grave. Inside the glass, the flame burned perfectly still, no flicker, even though the wind had picked up. The name on the stone read, Ella May Keller, 1903-1911. Someone had left a small doll at the base of it, porcelain face, cracked down the middle. The doll's glass eyes were mismatched, one blue, one brown. I knelt down trying to figure out if maybe the lantern was battery-powered. It wasn't. It looked ancient. When I leaned closer, I heard it, a child's humming coming from right behind me. I froze. My throat tightened. I didn't want to turn around, but I did. There was no one there. The humming continued, faint but clear. A little girl's tune, maybe a lullaby. It seemed to be coming from everywhere at once, behind the trees, between the stones, inside the air itself. Then I saw her. About 20 feet away, half hidden behind a monument, a small girl in a white dress was standing perfectly still. She was backlit by the last traces of daylight, so I couldn't see her face, only the outline of her head and those thin, unmoving arms at her sides. I said, "Hey, are you lost?" She didn't answer. She just tilted her head, slowly, and I realized she was holding something in her hand. A lantern. just like the one on the grave. I took one step backward, and the lantern flame beside me went out, instantly. The whole cemetery dropped into blackness. I couldn't even see my own hands. I fumbled for my phone to turn on the flashlight, but when the beam came on, the girl was gone. I spun around, searching. Nothing. I was breathing so hard, I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears. Then, maybe 10 seconds later, I heard the humming again, right next to me. I swung the flashlight toward the sound and caught a glimpse of her face inches from mine. Her eyes weren't eyes at all, just hollow, shadowed sockets glowing faintly orange, like the reflection of a flame trapped inside her skull. I screamed and bolted through the gravestones, tripping and scraping my knee. I didn't look back. I don't remember climbing the fence, just hitting the ground on the other side and sprinting for my car. When I got inside and slammed the doors, I realized my hands smelled like smoke, old sooty smoke like burned metal. I looked through the windshield and saw the faint glow of the lantern again, right where I'd been standing. Only now, the light was moving, weaving slowly between the graves, heading toward the woods. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I told my mom what happened. She didn't believe me, but she did tell me something I didn't know. The little girl, Ella Mae Keller, was part of a family that died in a house fire more than a century ago, not far from where that section of the cemetery was built. Apparently, people in town used to say that if you saw a lantern flicker between the graves, you weren't supposed to follow it, because if you did, you'd lead her back home. I haven't been back to my sister's grave since, but sometimes, when I drive past that road at night, I see a tiny orange glow moving through the trees. And every time I do, my phone flashlight turns on by itself, just for a second, then dies. Story 3. The Voices Under the Mausoleum. My name's Tyler, and this happened in June of 2024. I'm 21 now, but that night still wakes me up sometimes, sweating, shaking, and wishing I'd never gone near that place. It started as one of those stupid, let's do something creepy nights. My friends Mason, Eric, and I were bored after a party. It was about 1 a.m., and Eric said he knew a cemetery just outside town that was supposedly haunted. Something about an old mausoleum that locals said was cursed. I wasn't really into ghost stuff, but I didn't want to be the buzzkill. We grabbed some flashlights, a Bluetooth speaker, and a half-empty bottle of rum from Mason's trunk, then drove out there. The road turned to dirt about halfway, and after another mile we reached a rusted iron gate with a private property, closed after dark sign. The cemetery was on a hill, surrounded by oaks. It looked ancient. We parked off the road and climbed the fence. The first thing I noticed was how wrong the air felt, thick like you were breathing through a wet cloth. The second thing was the silence. No bugs, no wind, no distant cars, just our footsteps crunching gravel. We started wandering between the stones, reading names out loud, cracking dumb jokes. Mason played a few creepy sounds from his phone to set the mood. I was laughing, but inside I felt tense. I kept catching movement in my peripheral vision, like someone walking between the graves, just out of sight. The mausoleum stood at the center of the cemetery, a small stone building with twin doors chained shut. The words above it were barely legible: the Wexler family, 1871-1912. Eric shined his light through the iron bars on the doors. Inside was a narrow hallway lined with nameplates. Something glittered deeper in, like a piece of metal catching the light. Mason leaned closer and said, "Looks like a key or something." He pulled on the chain. It didn't budge. Then he laughed and kicked it once. The chain snapped clean in half. I swear to God, the sound that came out of that building didn't belong in this world. It was like a low moan mixed with a breath, deep, drawn out, echoing from below the floor. We all froze. No one said a word. Then Mason, because he's an idiot, pushed the doors open and said, "Yo, I'm going in." I told him that was a terrible idea, but Eric was already filming with his phone. They both stepped inside. I stayed at the entrance. The air pouring out of that place smelled like dirt and rot. Mason pointed his light down the narrow corridor. There was a metal grate in the floor near the back, half rusted away. "Probably a vent," he said. Then he leaned down to look through it. He went completely silent. "Dude?" I asked. He didn't respond. He just stayed frozen there, flashlight trembling in his hand. Then, without warning, he screamed, this guttural animal scream that made my knees go weak. Eric grabbed him by the arm, and they both stumbled out of the mausoleum. Mason fell onto the grass, shaking violently. He dropped his flashlight, and I swear it looked like he'd gone pale, like his skin had drained of color. "What the hell happened?" I shouted. He was gasping, eyes wide, whispering, "They're not dead down there." We tried to ask him what he meant, but he just kept repeating it, staring at the open doors. Eric finally grabbed the chain and tried to wrap it back around the handles, but as soon as he touched it, we all heard something. From beneath the ground, whispering. Hundreds of voices whispering all at once, rising and falling like a crowd in prayer. The sound came through the grass, through the soles of our shoes, vibrating in our bones. Mason started screaming again, saying, "They're calling my name! They're saying my name!" I grabbed him by the shirt and pulled him toward the fence. Eric was behind us, cursing non-stop. As we climbed the fence to get out, I looked back once, and that was the mistake. The doors of the mausoleum were slowly swinging open on their own. Inside, the light from Mason's dropped flashlight was flickering wildly, and through the open doors, I could see movement. Something dark, shifting just under the metal grate, pressing up from beneath it like dozens of hands trying to break through. We got to the car and peeled out so fast we nearly hit a ditch. Mason wouldn't stop muttering to himself the entire ride home. The next morning, Eric texted me that Mason hadn't slept at all. He said Mason kept hearing voices under the floor whenever he closed his eyes. I went to check on him that evening. He looked awful, dark circles under his eyes, jumpy at every sound. On his desk was a piece of paper covered in handwriting. Over and over in shaky lines he had written, "They're waiting under the stone." He moved out of state a week later. None of us have talked since. About a month ago, I got a notification from Instagram. Someone had tagged me in an old video. It was the clip Eric filmed that night. I didn't remember him posting it, and his account's been inactive since July. In the video, right before Mason screams, you can hear something faint in the background. A deep collective whisper. If you turn the volume all the way up, it sounds like it's saying our names. Story 4. The Man Who Cleaned the Graves. My name's Andrew, and I worked as a part-time groundskeeper at a cemetery in Massachusetts for most of 2024. It was an easy job at first, peaceful even. I was there 4 days a week, mowing, trimming, cleaning headstones, keeping the place looking presentable. I liked the quiet, I liked being left alone. There were 2 of us on the night shift, me and an older guy named Harold. He'd been working there for 20 years. Harold was one of those people who seemed harmless, but made you uncomfortable without doing anything wrong. He talked too quietly. He never looked you in the eye. And he had this habit of whispering to the graves while he cleaned them. The first time I noticed, he was kneeling by a family plot, wiping moss off a marble headstone. His lips were moving, his head tilted slightly like he was listening to someone. I thought maybe he was praying, but when I got closer, I heard what he was saying. He wasn't praying, he was apologizing. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "Didn't mean to wake you. Go back to sleep now." It was weird, but I figured maybe it was some personal ritual or grief thing. Everyone handles death differently, right? That was in March. By April, he'd started talking to more of them. He'd move from grave to grave, whispering under his breath, brushing off the leaves, patting the headstones like you'd pat someone's shoulder. One night, I heard him say, "It's almost time. Don't be mad this time. I'll be gentle." That one stuck with me. I asked the manager about Harold, said he was acting strange. She sighed and told me he'd lost his wife and daughter years ago, both buried there. "He's harmless," she said. "Just lonely. maybe she was right. But then the smell started. It was mid-May when I first noticed it. Not rot, not exactly. More like wet earth mixed with iron. Like blood. It clung to my gloves after I cleaned near the north lot. That's where Harold usually worked. One night, I stayed late to finish trimming before the rain hit. Around 11:30, I saw Harold's flashlight moving in the far section, even though his shift had ended 2 hours earlier. I called out, but he didn't respond. The light bobbed up and down, then disappeared behind the maintenance shed. When I walked over there, I heard something. A scraping sound, metal on stone. When I rounded the corner, Harold was kneeling beside an open grave. I'm not exaggerating. The ground was dug out, the casket lid halfway pried open. He had a crowbar in one hand and a brush in the other. "Harold," I said, my voice shaking, "what the hell are you doing?" He looked up at me slowly. His eyes caught the flashlight beam, completely calm, like I'd just interrupted a conversation. "They get dirty," he said. "They hate being dirty." I told him we had to call the manager, that this was illegal, insane, but he just smiled and said, No, you don't understand. They talk to me now. They want to be clean. They can't rest until someone takes care of them." He turned back toward the casket and reached inside with his brush. I heard something soft shift inside, like fabric. Then he froze. He whispered, "There you are," and started brushing again, gentle, rhythmic strokes like he was cleaning someone's hair. I took a step closer and saw what he was touching. It wasn't hair. It was bone. A skull, grey and crumbling, still half wrapped in rotted fabric. That's when I ran. I called the manager and the police. They found Harold sitting cross-legged beside the open grave, muttering to himself. He didn't resist, just kept whispering, "They're all clean now." They said he'd been digging at least 6 graves that month. Not deep, just enough to reach inside. The coroner said none of the bodies had been disturbed much, just brushed off like he was dusting them. Harold was sent to a psychiatric facility. I quit 2 days later, but here's the part I can't shake. Last week I got a call from the cemetery manager. She said they were doing a routine inspection near the same section. When they lifted one of the caskets Harold had tampered with, they found something that didn't belong to the deceased. A human finger bone wrapped in a cleaning rag. They checked Harold's fingerprints on file. The DNA matched, and the date of death on that grave, 2 months before Harold started working there. I still dream about him kneeling by that open grave, whispering apologies into the dark. And sometimes, when I'm half asleep, I can hear him say it again right next to my ear. "Don't be mad this time. I'll be gentle." Story 5. The grave that wasn't there. My name's Daniel. I work nights for a small security company in upstate New York. Most of the time I'm stationed at warehouses or construction sites. Easy money, no real danger. But in October 2024, I got assigned to a temporary contract at Ridgeview Memorial Cemetery. They'd had reports of vandalism, people sneaking in, stealing flowers, knocking over vases. The place was huge, quiet, and right next to a forest. I didn't mind it. I figured it would be just another boring shift with coffee and podcasts. The first 2 nights were fine. I parked by the caretaker's office, did my hourly patrols with a flashlight, signed the logbook. There was a weird fog that rolled in every night after midnight, but that's normal for October. Then came night 3. Around 2:15 a.m., I was walking the eastern section, rows of older graves that hadn't been visited in decades. As I turned down one of the paths, my flashlight flickered, then dimmed. I tapped it, got it working again, and that's when I noticed something odd. A grave I didn't recognize. It was a simple headstone, fresh, unweathered, standing right between 2 that I knew for sure had been there since the 1950s. The ground around it looked recently disturbed. No flowers, no marker flag from the groundskeepers. I stepped closer. The name carved on the stone was Daniel Reed, 1997 2024. My name, my birth year, this year. I froze. I thought it was some kind of prank, maybe one of the other guards messing with me. But no one else worked that shift. I was alone. I touched the stone. The surface was cold, like metal that had been sitting in the snow. My breath came out white in the air, even though it wasn't that cold. Then I heard it. From beneath the soil, a dull thump, followed by another. Then a slow, dragging scrape, like something heavy shifting under the dirt. I stumbled backward, nearly tripping over the curb of another plot. The thumping grew louder, rhythmic, too slow to be mechanical, too deliberate to be random. Then it stopped. The silence that followed felt wrong, heavy, like the entire air around me was holding its breath. I tried calling dispatch on the radio, but all I got was static. I turned back toward the grave, and the name on the headstone was gone, just a blank slab of granite. And then, faintly, I saw my own breath in the reflection, except the figure standing behind me in the stone wasn't Timmy. It looked like me, but older, gaunt, eyes hollow, wearing the same uniform, the same patch, the same name tag. Except the skin around the eyes was dark, almost bruised, and the mouth was slightly open like it was whispering something. I couldn't hear it at first, so I leaned in closer, just a little, and then I heard it say my name, whispered perfectly clear, like it came from behind my ear. Daniel. I spun around. Nothing. The entire section was empty. I ran back to the car, locked the doors, and waited until sunrise before calling my supervisor. He didn't believe me, obviously. He said there was no record of any new burials in that section. But here's the thing. When I came back the next night, I checked that same row again. The grave was gone. No disturbed soil, no blank stone, just grass. I quit that job a week later, couldn't sleep, couldn't shake that feeling. But 2 nights ago, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. No message, just a single image. It was a photo of that same headstone, same name, same dates. The timestamp on the photo said October 28th, 2024, 2:17 a.m. That's the exact time I saw it, exactly 1 year ago this month. I blocked the number immediately, but I can't stop thinking about something. When I touched the stone that night, I remember feeling something beneath my hand, like an indentation near the base, a few letters carved too shallow to see in the dark. Now, when I dream, I can read them clearly. It says, "Return at midnight." And lately, no matter where I go, every clock in my apartment stops at 12 a.m.